So now we're going to take a deeper dive into the basic panel. The basic panel is very powerful because it provides you a lot of ways to manipulate your photo and change the temperature of the photo by manipulating the sliders. So let's dive in. I currently have the image of the waterfall and the rainbow selected, and I did change the profile to the camera vivid, and you can see here to the right in the white balance, it does say as shot. If I was using a different color profile, it would say something different here. As a matter of fact, if I grab the drop down, I could choose a different option. Now, it wasn't really cloudy on this day, but I could choose cloudy, and you can see automatically it warms it up a lot. I can change this to daylight because it was during the day, and that looks a lot like what we already had. Or I could choose another preset here. Maybe I had a flash that caused some residue in there and fix that. So this is to fix the white balance. I'm going to choose as shot again, and that returns it back, and you can see it's a bit of a blue cast. No matter which options I choose, the sliders here are kind of in the center, and they're not changing too much. The temperature here is a little bit in the blue area. I could move it to the warmer temperature over here to the right. Okay, I think it was set to 5800. I could dial that number back in. There we go. So I'm back to where I was. The tint changes the color. So here you can see I'm getting more into the greens. Here I'm getting more into the magentas. I can set that back to 0. Double-clicking on a slider icon returns it back to its starting position. So it was a +4 there. Same thing here. I can double-click, and they're about 49.50. When we go down below, you can see we can work on the tone. In the tone section, I have an auto button that's selected, so it's automatically adjusting the tone. But I can change the exposure, the contrast. Now, if I want to, I can also look at the histogram here. And the histogram is showing me that this particular image has a lot of information here on the left, a lot of information on the right. Now, the information on the left are the shadows. The information on the right are the highlights. And in the center, there's a lot of grays here in the center. Now, as I hover over this histogram, it highlights the content that I'll be working with. So remember I said that on the left, it's the shadows and the blacks. Okay, and you can see blacks is highlighted down here in the basic panel. If I move it to the right, now you're saying I'm working with the shadows. Now I'm going into exposure area here in the center. Then I go here to the right, I get into the highlights. And then all the way to the right is the whites. So as I hover over the histogram, I can actually click and drag. Let's say I felt that this area was a little bit too white, or I wanted to change the settings there. I can click in the white area, and I can pull it back. And now you can see the details of the puffy clouds coming in. It's not as washed out as it was before. And all I'm doing is clicking on the histogram and dragging it to the left. And that's making it so it's more defined. I'm bringing in more gray colors and shadows into that area. Okay, so it's really, really neat what you can do. If I double click, I can set it back to what it was. And you can see it's washed out. You can't see the details of the puffy clouds. But I'm going to move that back to -91, which I had. It looks pretty good. It's bringing in that shadow and didn't affect anything else in the image, so that's another nice thing. Now I do have some dark areas out here on the left where, again, I've lost some details. So I could come over here and say, okay, where are those blacks? And let's bring them forward here. I'm going to move them to the right. Now this one is lightening up a lot of the image, and I'm not liking that as much. But the idea is I tried it, and I saw that I didn't like it, so I'm just going to set it back to the beginning by double-clicking on the slider and returning it back to the way it was. All of these are non-destructive edits. You're not actually changing the information in the original file. You're making it so it remembers this information, but at the same time, I can play around and test whatever I think I might like and go back and forth and see if I do like it or not. I can reset it at any time by double-clicking on the slider icon to move it back. Now, if I want to, I can actually sample the color on the image itself. In the basic panel here in the upper left, there's this little icon that says White Balance Selector. So I can click on this, and now what I can do is I can select the areas that I think are supposed to be gray. So if I think this area is supposed to be gray, it's really supposed to be water-like, but apparently whatever was in the sky is being reflected here, so it must have been a gray sky. So I can click on this, and now if I drag up or down, I can change this information. And instantly, once I clicked, it set that the entire image. And I'm not sure that I like that so much. It did change it to make it a little warmer here on this side. I did return to the whites not showing the reflections here so much. So what I can do is I can go to the history panel, and I can revert back in time. So right here I have the history panel. Here's where I did the white balance custom. So I think I'm going to go back to this blacks here, and that'll return it to the way it was. Now it has a little bit of a green cast, so I'm going to see if I can remove that. So here I've got my tint, and I'm going to pull it a little bit to the right. And if I want, I can keep scrolling down. I've got some presence information for clarity, dehaze. I've got some vibrance. I can make it more vibrant here by pulling that one to the right. I can desaturate it a little bit if I want. Now with regards to clarity, I can sharpen some of the details and the texture as well. So I can move this to the right. I'll get much more clear textures. Now when you're doing this, if you press the Alt key on some of these sliders, they do show you another perspective, which helps you figure out what you're working on. Alter option. And you can see now the clarity and the texture are starting to pop in those trees. I can also click on it so I can zoom in a little bit further. So again, play around with these settings. There is no right or wrong answer. You are the content creator, and you get to decide how your images are going to look. So the basic panel gives you a lot of control over what you're doing inside of the image, and you get to set the information by playing around with the sliders and working with whatever image you have. So we've learned a little bit about the basic panel. Now we're going to take a look at the effects panel. Working with the effects panel allows us to apply vignettes to our images. And in Lightroom, it's very powerful because it gives you a subtle way to focus on a subject within your image. And so let's dive into working with the effects panel and see what this looks like. I currently have an image here. This is Jason. He's sitting on the river, the side of a river. And I want to kind of accentuate this area here in the center. And so to do that, I'm going to move away from the basics panel and go into the effects here towards the bottom. In the effects panel, you can see it says post-crop vignetting. And a vignette is where it darkens or lightens the outer edges of the image. Now, typically, you can work with the color values in your photo, and you can drag these sliders. But sometimes it's harder to see what's going on, and so you can work and convert the image to black and white first, and then go from there. Another thing you can do to make it so you can see this better is when you're grabbing the sliders and you drag them left or right, press the Alt or Option key, and that'll show you where the effects are happening. So you can now clearly see the dramatic darkness that's coming in from those outer edges. As I pull the amount here to the left, it gets dark. If I pull the amount to the right, it gets light. So maybe I want to have lighter edges. But if I let go of the Alt, okay, you'll see that the setting kind of goes away. I'm going to double click on that. Now, other than just the amount, you can work on the midpoints, the roundness, and the feathering, and the highlights. Notice they're grayed out. As long as I haven't altered the amount at all, I'm not going to be able to change any of these other filters. Here at the top in the upper right, I have the ability to choose how the image is going to handle the vignette and what priority we're going to have. So I could have it so the color takes priority, and now when I move the slider, the color information is going to have priority. Now I've moved the amount a little bit to the left. I'm at -20. And then the midpoint, roundness, feather, and highlights have become available. Again, pressing the Alt or Option key while moving these values will make it so I can really see the effect that's being applied. So here I'm changing the color for the midpoints, going left, making them brighter here, so I'm reducing that effect. If I let go of the Alt key, you can see it has an effect there, but you can't really tell. It's very subtle. I like that it's subtle, but while I'm trying to make this midpoint change, pressing the Alt key really shows me the exaggeration of that information. I'm going to move it out a little bit. The roundness. How round is that vignette? So, for example, if I take the roundness and I move it all the way to the left, you can see it's not very round at all. It's actually kind of making it almost the same size as the square of the image. If I move it to the right, you can see it is getting much more round. I'm going to pull it out a little bit to the left. Now feather. Feather determines the softness around the edge of something. So if I press the Alt key and I drag, you can see to the left, it's much more solid. Look at that, I'm getting a solid circle everywhere. If I let go, now you can actually see the solid circle of that vignette occurring all the way around. That's horrible. You would probably never do that unless you're looking for that effect. In this case, however, I'm going to pull it to the right. And notice it starts to blend in. It's much more softer. It's going to be a much more subtle effect as I move it further and further to the right. And then the last item is for highlights. Again, if I press the Alt or the Option key and I drag this slider, I can pull it to the left or to the right to determine how it's going to affect the highlights in the image. So right here in the sky, you can see that's being affected by this. But the corner down here where it's a little darker, and here it's not, you can't see it changing too much. But in the sky it is on the clouds. Okay, so I'm affecting the highlights within the image and changing how that's going to represent in the vignette. So working with effects gives us the ability to work with vignettes. But we also have this grain section down here. Sometimes in your images you have a lot of noise, and the graininess of that noise, changing the amount here, will you can set that higher or lower, and then you can resize and work through that. So working with the effects panel lets you change and work with the graininess of an image, or it lets you create a vignette around the image so you can accentuate whatever the subject is within your image. Play around with these settings and see what works for you with your images. Another editing tool that's available inside the Develop module is the ability to go in and heal areas using the Spot tool. The Spot tool will let you remove elements that you don't want in your image, and it'll select pixels that kind of match the area that you want to cover up. You can use the healing version of the Spot tool, or you can use the clone version, and I'll show you both in the next example. So let's dive in. I'm currently using this image where I have that picture of the river, and Jason's not sitting down yet. He's just walking into the scene. And the problem is he's cut off here on the left-hand side. So I want to remove him from the scene, period. I don't want to have him there. I just want to have the nice picture of the river that's here. So I'm going to go under the histogram and click this Band-Aid icon. The Band-Aid icon is literally to Band-Aid and fix problems like you do with your boo-boos. So once you've selected the Band-Aid tool, you can choose to either clone or heal. Cloning will give you exact pixels, whereas healing will take the pixels and blend them into the area where you're painting on the picture. So I'm going to choose heal. Now I do need to increase the size of my brush, and I can use the hard brackets to the right of the letter P. Close hard bracket will increase the size of the brush, and you can see it's getting bigger here as I put it in the sky. And the open hard bracket will make it smaller and smaller. Usually, you make the size of the brush relative to the size of what you're trying to replace. So in this case, the size I currently have here is fine, and I think I'm at 77. As I'm doing these little brackets, you can see the size value here is changing. Now it's down to 60, okay? So I'm going to increase that to 77 again. There. Now, I'm going to paint on Jason's head here. And what's going to happen is the computer, using again the Adobe Sensei machine learning algorithms, is going to try to figure out what pixels belong in that area. And it's pulled from these rocky shore here and the grass that's there and put it inside that area. And because it's random pixels, it kind of looks like it fits. Now I still have healing turned on, so it is blending. If I didn't want that to be there, I could actually pull from the sky, for example. So I could go up here, pull from the sky. I could pull from the water here. You can see that's actually coming in. I could pull from down here in the rocks. Okay, so I can change the position. If I didn't like exactly where it captured, I can move it around. So I think right here is probably a little better. You can see that blends very nicely. Now I'm going to do another area here where it probably is leg, and I'm going to select this area. And again, it figured it out. It said, okay, based on the greens that are there, we're going to pull in from the trees here. And when I click done, watch what happens. You don't even see Jason in this photo any longer. So using the spot healing, in this case, blends the pixels that you've selected from into that position and fixes it. Now let's take a look at what clone does. I'm going to find a different image. I think I'll go with the one where I have some flowers on the table. And we did lay out some Valentine's Day kind of candies and stuff. And there's a repeat of this panda bear box that I don't want to have here. So I'm going to try to remove that from the scene using the clone stamp. So if I click on the Band-Aid again, I'm going to change the target here for the brush to clone, and I'm going to get exact pixels. Now I do have a size of my brush. It's the same as before. It was 77. I can use the brackets again to change that size if I want to. But at this point, I'm just going to paint in this area and see what I get as a result. I'm just trying to paint that away. Now that that's entirely covered, it says, okay, well, I'm just going to pick right here with the napkin. Well, that's not really what I want. What I want is basically the texture here on the table. So I'm going to move that over here. And notice, because I'm getting exact pixels, it's bringing in those pixels from that area. Now, if I chose the healing option here, okay, you'll see it's going to blend in. That might actually work a little bit better. But I can do exact pixels by choosing the clone stamp. And when I choose that option, it's exactly the pixels that are in that area over there. And when I click done, you're going to see the pixels are there. Now, it's a little rough here around the edges. I might want to change the feather on that or something. So I can go back to the beginning. I can select this again, choose my clone options. I can paint along this area. Now it grabbed from a different point in the picture. It's pretty funny. Again, it's all the machine learning algorithms that are doing that, the Adobe Sensei. And now I'm going to change the feather around the edges here. So I'm going to increase the feather around those edges or decrease it. Maybe it'll blend a little bit better. And you can also change the opacity setting here. So I can slide that down. The further I go to the opacity here, I'm making it more and more transparent. You can see it's not even covering up the panda bear any longer. But I think I'll go right about 97 there. So it is blending a little bit better. Let's take a look, hit done, and you can still see that it's showing up some information. So in this case, even this example might be a good test for the healing brush. So the idea is you can use these spot brushes to go in and remove content from an image, or you can clone exact pixels from one place and place them somewhere else in your images. And by doing that, you can remove content from one spot and have it so it looks like it was never there before. Now we're ready to export some of the content out. We're going to start by exporting out the catalog, then we're going to talk about exporting out the photos and metadata as 3 separate items. So let's dive in. In my Lightroom application, I have the catalog selected for all photographs here, and I'm going to go up to File, and I'm going to go down to Export as Catalog. When I choose the Export as Catalog dialog box, it's showing me where I can save the file on a location here. It says Desktop. But I'm going to go to this desktop here. I have 2 desktops. And I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call it, let's see here, 11/19_2021. So I'm just putting the date. So I have something there, and I'll put my catalog. It is going to save as supported files. There's no other choice. And you see some checkboxes here, exporting a catalog with 96 photos, because I selected all of them. It's going to export selected photos only, which I have all of them, so that's not an issue. Export negative files. Okay, so if I've got negatives. Build includes smart previews, so I could do that. I do have some smart previews in my list. Include available previews, and that'll work as well. So once I hit save on the desktop, I now see that I have the new file I've created called My Catalog, and inside there is the Lightroom files and the preview information. In the Lightroom files, I have all of the photo information there stored as you would expect as a catalog. So here's all the information, all 96 images. Now, we can export the files themselves. To export the files, I go up to File, Export, and when I get to the Export One File dialog box, it gives me this dialog box that comes up, and I can choose the location. I can email the file, I can add it to an optical drive, so CD or DVD, and I can even do a hard drive. If I had an external drive connected, I would see this in this list. You have some presets here on the left, and we have a lot of settings, and it does say export one file to this location on the desktop. Excuse me. It's asking me to put it in some kind of subfolder. I'm not going to do that. We can add it to a particular catalog if I wanted to. I can If it already exists, we can overwrite it without warning, or we can have the system ask us what to do. I'm going to use the file name that already exists, so we're going to do file name, or I can specify a file name. Yeah, we'll just do file name. I don't have any video, but the file settings here are going to be important. Right now, the default setting is to save as a JPEG file, Joint Photographic Experts Group file. Now this is going to discard some of the pixels in order to make it so it has a smaller footprint. It has what's known as a lossy compression scheme. And you can see here to the right is the quality is at 60%. I prefer the file type of PNG, which is a portable network graphic, and it's more for modern day usage. It was created after, way after JPEG and GIF were created, and it's meant to replace a couple of those, but it never really has. But PNG is the file type I want. It uses a lossless compression scheme and usually gives you the closest representation to the original because it uses mathematical algorithms in its compression scheme. You can change the color space. So here RGB actually has a wider color gamut than sRGB, so I could choose that if I wanted to. And it tells you the bit depth here. You can choose different options, 16. Again, the more I choose these options, it's going to make it a larger file size. Now, below that, we have the ability to add some sharpening. Usually, I think we talked about editing. I said there isn't a photo that I don't have where I don't include some form of sharpening. So if I check this box, you can see here the blend mode is to sharpen by screen, matte paper, or glossy paper. Since it's going to be saved as a digital file, I'll stick with screen. And the amount says standard, but you could do high or low. Standard's a pretty good option. So just leaving those as the defaults is probably a good idea. The metadata says all metadata. Now, the only metadata that I really added other than keywords and such, we're going to see exporting that in a moment, is the copyright and the creator info. So I'm going to grab the drop down here and choose copyright and contact info only. And that's what I'm going to save there. I can add a watermark or I can do some post-processing. Now in the bottom left, there's the ability to do a plugin manager. So you can see whatever plugins are currently installed in this Lightroom application. And it looks like there's a Flickr plugin, a Facebook plugin, Nikon plugin, and you can add plugins that way as well. I'm going to hit done here. And but since I've made some changes in the settings over here on the right, I'm going to add that as a user preset so I can use it in the future. I'm going to call it Jim's PNG preset. Jim's PNG. I'm going to save it in the user presets. And again, so I won't have to do this over and over again. I will check this box. Now you can see some selections are hidden when the presets are checked, and that's okay. And I'm going to hit batch export. Now when I choose the batch export, it's going to take all the files and export them out. Unfortunately, I believe I did tell it to go to the desktop, so I might get, oh, actually it's only the one. So we're going to get it out to the desktop. Choosing the batch export is going to allow me to do many files. So I can choose a parent folder, and I can specify where that's going to go. I'm going to say choose the parent, put it in the subfolder here. I could maybe create a export from Lightroom. There we go. And looks good. Choosing the parent folder will overwrite any destinations saved in this preset. That's fine. All right, I guess I'll go here. And now we should be good. Export buttons available. So now that I've exported that out, I'm going to go to my File Explorer. And on the left-hand side, choose my desktop. I went to the Lightroom files, and I should see a subfolder in here called Export from Lightroom. And there's the one file that I've just exported out to my folder. Now, the last thing I'd like to show you is how to export the keyword list. By going to the metadata menu bar here at the top, second item from the bottom is to export the keywords. Now the keywords are all the list of words that I use, like natural beauty, nature, outdoors, the names of faces, that kind of thing. Anything that I added as a keyword to photos. So Lightroom keyword list is going to go into my Lightroom files. When I click save here, it'll be a text list and it will save that. Now if I want to make sure that the settings are correct, I can go to the catalog settings and click on metadata. And you can see here, it's going to include, for example, any address information that you might have inserted as a keyword or as your metadata. and any other information that's written here. But at this point in time, I go to my file list, file folder, desktop, Lightroom files, and there's the keyword list inside of here. It's only about 1 kilobyte, so it's not very large. So exporting your content out, individual photos or whatever selected photos you have, exporting out your catalog, which is all your photos or whatever photos you've selected. In my case, I selected all of them. And exporting out your metadata or your keywords in order to be able to work with this as a list that you can apply elsewhere.
We hope this video helped. Make sure to click the thumbs up and click the subscribe button right here. And click the link above to check out our Limelight classes, a free virtual live training. See you in the next video.